Hi everyone, Lisa here from Dog Days and Training for Life. This is our 9th live chat, and I'm so excited today for a couple of reasons. One is we will be having some new people joining in to have a watch and a listen. There's going to be some people from some other groups that I participate in that will be stopping by, either hopefully live with us now or later on in replay. So welcome, thanks so much for joining in. And for those of you that are here today live, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's a big commitment, especially for those of us that are living on the West Coast. It's pretty early in the morning, so I'm very impressed that you're taking the time to get up early and have a listen. So the other reason I'm really excited about this particular chat is it is the first time that I will actually be covering a topic that's been suggested by one of the members of our group, which is really exciting for me. It's an awesome topic, and I really hope that it is interesting for you and helpful. So if you've been listening to my chats or you've been a client, you know that we do talk a lot about anxiety and fear in our dogs and reactivity. It's a pretty common theme because so many people are dealing with it. So today we are going to talk about that, but we're going to come in from a slightly different angle. Today we are going to focus on the other end of the leash. So we're actually going to be talking about you rather than your dog. And specifically, what we're going to be covering is managing your emotions and how to gain a sense of empowerment when you are out on walks with your reactive dog. So if you're listening in, chances are this part of your life experience that you feel the heart racing, the gut tightening, that oh no feeling at times when you're out with your dog. And it's understandable. If you have a reactive dog, it can be a very emotional experience because we're worried about the dog reacting, what's going to happen. Oh my gosh, I hope no one's going to get hurt. At some point you may even become sensitive and reactive or emotional to just the trigger, your dog's trigger appearing. There can be lots of reasons why you get emotional. And what I want to start with is trying to figure out a little bit more about where that's coming from. Of course, it's obvious for the reasons that I mentioned. If you're feeling uncomfortable. And listen, guys, if you have any other reasons any other emotions that you're feeling other than fear or trepidation or anxiety, feel free to pop it into the comments because I'd love to know, because we can address those too. But for now, we're going to focus basically on the anxiety. And so it makes sense on the surface of why we would be experiencing that. But I want to try and dig a little bit deeper and think a bit more about where that's actually coming from. And I've been thinking about it a little bit, and what's coming into my head now is, on a deeper level, the root of these emotions, I think, is because we don't have a sense of control when we're out with a reactive dog. Or we may feel a loss of control, that we can't say to that, oh, he's super friendly, don't worry, he just wants to say hi, dog, that's coming flying into your space. We can't say, stop, don't come any closer. Or we can't tell the kid on the skateboard that's flying at you on the sidewalk going, you shouldn't be here, you need to go do that somewhere else. It's not possible for us to control those triggers. It's not possible often for us to be able to predict those triggers and when they're going to show up. And I think for those reasons, that sense of lack of control in and of itself can create a lot of tension for us. And if you think about it, moving past us, if we just consider our dogs for a moment, too, what's going on with them? Those reactions that they're having, the lunging, the barking, the growling, those blow-ups, what they're actually trying to do, those are all distance increasing behaviors. So really, from their perspective, what they're trying to do too is have a sense of control. They're trying to control those triggers that are upsetting them and get them further away so they have a sense of well-being again, that they feel safe and comfortable again. So both ends of the leash, there's something to do with control, either a lack of it or a loss of it or trying to get it. So my first suggestion would be to try and make things more comfortable for us is to think about this in a different way, to change our approach when we're out with our reactive dogs or fearful dogs. And my suggestion is that we think about our dogs that are struggling, trying to gain control, and shift our focus onto them. And think about how can we support them? That we think about becoming their advocate, that it's our responsibility when we go out, well, at home too, of course, but when we go out specifically, that we are responsible to keep them comfortable, that we are responsible to provide a sense of well-being, and that we want to have them feeling safe, that it's our job when we go out to do that, that we need to take charge of that, that we need to make good choices for them so that they aren't having to react, that we get techie for a minute or for a moment, that we can reduce the likelihood, or ideally remove it, that they are going to have to react. So that's a big shift. It changes our focus from responding or reacting, I should say reacting to things in the environment, and kind of being at the mercy of the environment and what's happening around us, or being kind of a victim to things that are happening in the environment, and shifting that to focusing on taking care of our dog's needs and almost being like their superhero, that we're there to ensure that they are comfortable and that we're making choices on their behalf so they don't need to be doing those things. And those are the things that are creating the reactivity and the fear. So that on its own, that's kind of a big picture concept, but boy, is it ever powerful. It just completely changes your focus when you're out on walks. And when you have that sense of responsibility, I think it really kind of brings us out of that likelihood of us being, more concerned about what's going on and what may go wrong, and instead taking on this role of looking out for our dogs and taking responsibility for them. So that's my first big tip. Now, the next thing that we can talk about is management. Now, for any of you that are in some kind of training program where you're changing behavior, whether your dog's a counter surfer or you're working on recalls, whatever the case may be, any good training plan has some part of it includes management. And management really is just about removing the likelihood of your dog repeating behavior that you don't want them to be doing. So it's easier for them to be able to get the behavior happening that you do want. So again, management's important for any training plan. But for this situation where your dog's fearful or reactive, it's especially important because we want to try and keep our dogs comfortable. And if that's our agenda, then a management's really necessary to be able to prevent our dogs from having these episodes where they have the need to react, or they're feeling insecure, or don't have a sense of well-being. So it's especially important for our dog's sake that we use management well. But if we go back to the other end of the leash and are thinking about ourselves, then management's really important too for our sense of well-being. Because if you think about specifically going out on walks with a reactive dog, what is the number one thing that we would consider? If you're already working on a training plan for reactivity, you probably already know what this is. You'll have heard it quite a few times, hopefully. I bring it up all the time in all my classes and behavioral sessions. If you haven't thought of what it is yet, it starts with the letter D, little hint. What I'm thinking of is distance. Distance is your number one friend. That's the thing that you always want to be able to focus on. That's your number one management tool. So for our sakes, as well as your dogs, we want to be thinking about where we take our dogs. This is a very important consideration. Is the space big enough? If that is that location, is that environment large enough that we can see triggers from far, far away, beyond the distance that your dog would react? Do we have a way to add distance if we need to make more distance? Can we move out of the way versus having the trigger, whether that's a person or a dog, coming straight at us? Do we have a way to have an escape route? All of those things are really important considerations. And the way that that will help you is if you always are choosing places to go where you are confident that you have your escape route, that you have enough space for the stage that your dog is at. And that may be different, be really big. It might be 100 feet or 200 feet to start with. And then eventually that magic number maybe 50 feet or 20 feet. But wherever your dog is at, you want to assure yourself that you can take your dog places where you can set that up for them. And when you know that you're going to always be able to have that ability to see those triggers long before they become a problem, that you have a way to make extra distance, that you'll never get trapped or squished because you're on a narrow trail, that you always have a fast and easy exit route, then that is a huge confidence booster, because then you don't need to worry about stuff. You always will have a way to keep your dog comfortable and under threshold. So management is so huge. I can't emphasize how important it is, because a lot of times I find that it's missing in training plans, any kind of training plan, but especially with fear and reactivity. A lot of times when I have people that are already working on something and I'm stepping in to give them a hand, they sometimes don't have any management in place, but often it's not suitable. They're not doing enough. So this is one that I really want to bring your attention to, because it's really important. Yes, for your dog, but it's also very important for you and your sense of well-being and your confidence when you go out with your dog. Now, as far as management goes, I'll just say a couple more things. Management is going to vary to a great deal from dog to dog and during your training plan. I have started with some dogs where their management plan for the first 2 weeks was no walks, that they go on a holiday from walks, that they get a complete break from that anxiety, either because the dogs were really struggling or the parents are really struggling. And giving them a complete break from it will allow the cortisol and the adrenaline to go down, because when the dog is triggered or gets emotional, those hormones stay in their system for up to 72 hours. So if we're going out every day or even twice a day and they're having issues almost every time they're going out, that means that those hormones never get a chance to go back down, and for you as well. So, in some more extreme cases, management might mean to start with that we're not going out off the property at all for just a short period. It's short term, that's not long-term solution, obviously. It may mean just going out every other day for a walk and then finding on the non-walk days other things to do that are enriching, mentally stimulating, and fun for your dog. Walks aren't the only way to accomplish those things. So those are a couple examples of management. Other ideas for management are, we've sort of hinted about just being super mindful about where you're going, about creating more distance. Another one is when you go out, that you may be able to make certain locations be more appropriate because of the time you choose to go out, because the triggers aren't there to such a high degree, or maybe they're not around at that time at all. So it makes that location a more suitable choice for both you and your dog at that point. So there's lots of options available. There's not only one way to create management for your situation. So it is absolutely doable no matter where you're at, or what stage of confidence building your dog is at. Now, another great thing to consider is skills that you might be using when you're out. No matter what the skill is, whether it's intended to be used in the home or outdoors, both places, or only when you're out of the house, the training initially needs to start in the home. So that's your classroom environment. It's distraction-free, depending on your home environment. I mean, it's more, in theory, distraction-free compared to outdoors. Both you and your dog feel safe there. Your dog won't have to be vigilant about, being watchful for potential triggers showing up. So it just makes sense that that's where you're going to start the training. And it's important to train the skills that you ultimately are going to use outside when you're with your dog on walks, because we want to get those proficient. We want to have both you and your dog confident that you can do it, that it's not a big deal, that you're struggling through trying to figure out what's going on in the presence of the trigger. That just doesn't make sense. So it's really important that you take the time to get both yourself and your dog able to perform these tools or skills that you're going to use, so that when the time comes and you need them, it's a no-brainer. You can just readily do them. You can readily ask for them. Your dog can readily perform them. And it's something that will help you rather than be a hindrance. Now, another reason it's great to practice, apart from your confidence and your dog's proficiency with the skill, the other thing it does is, if you are a positive reinforcement trainer or you're in a positive reinforcement program, we know about the importance of reinforcement, that there's so much value in building a solid reinforcement history, because that's what's going to make the behavior occur again in the future. That's what's going to make your dog more likely to do the behavior and more willing to do the behavior again in the future. So if you are taking your time to practice these skills and get them proficient, if you are training them using positive reinforcement, then while you're doing that, you're also building up a really good reinforcement history that's going to make those behaviors even more solid. So a couple great reasons to make sure before you start using these skills when you're out with your reactive dog, that you're practicing them at home first. And then when you're ready, when they're proficient there, then you can take them outside and practice them, but not with the triggers present. And then eventually the next step in the training plan would be practicing them with the triggers present, but at some distance. And once that's working, then you'll be ready to actually start using them in the presence of the trigger. All right, now another thing that another skill or tool that we need to have when you're working with a fearful or reactive dog is a confidence building program, because that's really kind of the gist of it. We could rely just on having management so that the dog is never exposed. And yes, they absolutely would stay comfortable, but for most dogs, that's not the best long-term solution. At some point, we need to address this actual trigger and help them start to feel more comfortable with it. So we're not going to get into the specifics of how to do that because we've covered that in a couple of other live chats. And because we want to be focusing on you in this particular chat, all I'm going to say about triggers is if you've done the same thing with your confidence building games, so these would be, again, the kind of techie word would be counter conditioning and desensitization. If you've practiced these at home first without the real triggers, but just with other things, so that you can become comfortable, your dog gets used to the games, that you can work out any little glitches that you may have, because timing matters. These things aren't really complicated to do, but the timing does make a huge difference. So you want to get all that stuff sorted out before you actually start doing it with the real triggers out in the world. And so once you've got all that sorted and you're comfortable with how you play the games, what's going to start to happen is you will get, and I can't wait for you to be able to experience this because it's so empowering. You'll go out one day and start looking for triggers. Now, I know that seems impossible, but once you know how to effectively counter condition your dog, once you know how the games work and you can play them and you found out or you understand, where that distance is that you need to be, and that's all part of learning how to play the game. Then when triggers appear and you've got yourself set up at that special distance, yippee, it's great because now you actually can actively be helping your dog develop a better response, a more relaxed response from the trigger, so that you can seize the opportunity to turn those oh no's into, oh boy, here we go, here's our chance. And that is such a fantastic feeling. So we want to be able to get you to a place where you are able to use triggers to your advantage and you no longer have that dreaded feeling when they appear. You're actually hoping they show up because you are ready for them. All right, so when we put all those things together, we've talked about the triggers, we've talked about building skills, and we've talked about management. So those are the three pieces of the puzzle. Now we need to think about how are we going to use those? How do they all fit together? So it's really important to have a plan of some kind before you go out with your dog. So depending on where your dog is in the training, you may need to be using more management, or you may be ready to start practicing or using some of the skills that you've been working on previously. Every dog's going to be different at what sort of balance is right for them. And so at any stage, as they're moving through the training plan, that's going to change. But if you're aware of that and you make a plan of what choices you're going to make for your dog before you go out, then you're not in reactive mode. If you go out and you know, let's say it's at the very beginning of the training and it's like just even the smell of the trigger will get your dog going, oh, what's happening? Then your game plan could be, if the trigger appears, we're out of here. Adios. Emergency U-turn and off we go. You're going to use that escape route. Maybe you only need to increase distance. The point is, wherever you're at, that you already have the choice that you're going to make for your dog in your head before you go out. So that way, it will allow you to have a more proactive response to when the triggers show up. That you already have run through your head. If the trigger comes and it's a certain distance, we're going to do this. If the trigger comes and it's at another distance that maybe is closer than your dog's threshold distance, then we're going to do that. So it just makes it so much easier for you to be confident that you know how you are going to respond based on where your dog is in the training plan. So again, that will change. It's not going to be the same answer. What will happen over time if your program is going well and the counter conditioning is going well, those distances are going to get shorter and or smaller and smaller and smaller. But the point is that you go out and you know what you're going to do ahead of time, so that you're not trying to formulate the plan once the trigger's showing up. That's where you're going to get yourself into trouble, because you're going to leave your dog kind of hanging, and they're going to be more inclined to feel, uh-oh, I need to step in and start doing stuff to keep myself comfortable. And remember, our goal is always to be our dog's advocate. So we need to be prepared with whatever's going to come our way to be able to step in and make the appropriate choices that are going to help our dog remain relaxed. Now, I might just really quickly go back, because I realized when I talked about practicing skills, there's no exact set that I say this is what you must have, but ones that I found over the years that I find really useful are eye contact, whether that's by default that your dog's just checking in, like auto check-ins are fantastic if you work on those. Being able to get attention by using their name or some other cue. Leash skills, because I really love when things start getting exciting around me. If we're in a mode where we're not just having to completely leave the environment, I use the leash skills that we've been practicing and that are solid now. It's kind of an anchor for both myself and the dog that I'm with, to give us something to be able to focus on, that rather than becoming potentially a big emotional thing, we're just going to focus on our leash skills and work through those like we have been in other environments. So I find that really useful and helpful. The other thing specific to reactivity is the emergency U-turn. And some of you may already be familiar with that. That's a fantastic one to have set up. Again, especially if you've been practicing it. So it's been built up as a really fun, pleasant skill that has a really solid reinforcement history. Then when it comes time for you to actually use it, it's going to just be such a handy tool to have. So that's one that I really, really recommend. Another one that I like too is targeting, because it's a great way to be able to guide your dog without having to grab your dog to move them around. And when they're in a more, aroused state, it's nice to be able to move them around without actually having to handle them, because sometimes that can be a little bit disconcerting to them and make things more stressful. The other cool thing about targeting too is, unlike food luring, which is a great management tool, targeting will give you a better idea of how your dog is feeling. Because if they've it's been trained solidly and then they choose not to do it, then that means there's something going on with them. They're a bit over threshold, and that would be an indicator to add distance or to get out of there. Okay, sorry. So I just wanted to make sure that, just in case you were wondering what kind of skills I'm talking about, those are great ones to work on. So you're probably going to ask, what about if I'm just working on these things that I don't have these skills solid yet? What am I supposed to do? Now, you remember in the beginning, I talked about part of management is if you're not ready to go out for whatever reason, then that needs to be considered. You're not going to take your dog out into places where you need to be doing all these things or using all these things if they're not ready. So you've got a couple of options. One is to, again, pick different locations where you're not going to need to use them at all. Skip some days where maybe you're not going out of the security of your property, so your dog can be more relaxed and you can enrich their day and give them some mental stimulation, practicing these different activities and providing exercise in a different way. But your other option is actually the walk itself. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this is one thing that I find very interesting because as a rule, for people who live in the city like myself, it's quite typical for us just to kind of snap on that 5 or 6 foot leash and go out for a walk around the block. We may go for a longer distance, but usually I call them block walks because basically, we have the dog at our side and we think we got to get some exercise, got to get moving. So that we're basically just going out for a march and our dogs are meant to be right with us. Now, if we change things around a little bit and think about from their perspective, if they were off leash, if you've ever seen your dog free in an area, able to move around as they choose with no restriction, you'll notice they don't tend to just walk in a straight line, right? They're all over the place, darting, changing directions, stopping and sniffing, racing off again. Some dogs will just plant their nose on the ground and then that's it. They're just on a track and going nonstop, like their nose does not come off the ground. Whatever your dog's habits are, it's pretty different than what we typically provide for them. So I think, and this is just anecdotal, this is just something I've been thinking about. There's no studies that I'm aware of to support this. But if you think how broad the expanse is from what their dogs would naturally want to be doing and what typically our walks can look like for them, we've removed all enrichment from them. So it's not surprising to me that they often start to become vigilant about things showing up in the environment. Because what else have they got to do, really? Where's their attention going to be other than noticing people showing up, noticing other dogs showing up? Now, I'm not saying that this is the reason, this is the root cause of reactivity. I'm not saying that at all. But I do feel that these unenriching block walks are certainly not doing anything to help our fearful or reactive dogs. So my next bit of advice would be make your dogs enriching. Make your dogs walks enriching, whether that's every walk for the whole walk or some portion of every walk or just doing it for some of your walks. My advice is every day, at least, if your dog is going outside for a walk, include some enrichment. And by enrichment, I mean give them some, ideally some more freedom. You can use a long line to make them move around depending on the environment that you're picking. Hopefully you can find a spot that's low in triggers, that's got lots of room. So if you need to, you can see things coming and get out of the way. But ideally a spot that's big enough so that you can give them the enrichment activity of being able to sniff and do naturally enriching activities without, being distracted by the triggers because you're in a great space. That's the ideal situation. But that they get to do these things that make them feel so good. The really cool thing about sniffing is it's a calming activity. Studies actually do show now, we have them, that your dog's heart rate slows down when they're sniffing. It's a calming activity. So when we're thinking about trying to get that cortisol and that adrenaline out of their system, doing enriching walks rather than just our regular block walk is such a great idea. And from our perspective, if we see our dogs relaxed and enjoying themselves, of course, that's going to make us feel better too. And if you can find those locations to do that where you've got your triggers, under control, that they're not going to be around at all, or they're only coming at a distance where you can, advocate for your dog and make the distance that they need to remain comfortable and be able to carry on having a nice, relaxed time. That's perfect. That's ideal. That's what you want to be doing. So the good thing about enrichment walks is it will allow you to be practicing your skills at home and get those solid and still be able to go out, but focus on other things that are fun for your dog and keeping them happy and relaxed. Now, on that note, I'll just stretch that one step further to how can we enrich our lives with our dogs in general. Apart from walks, at home as well, we can do things together, and hopefully you already are to some degree, but really think about how much of this are you doing, that we are doing things together that bring joy to both our dogs and ourselves, that help both of us relax and enjoy our time together. If we can do more of that over our days together, rather than morning before we go to work, go for block walk, dog's by himself all day, come home after dinner, the next portion of our time together is another block walk. If you can think, that day, there's a lot of time that's not filled with enjoyable activities together. Both you and your dog are spending a lot of your time together weekdays when you're working, doing things that are stressing both of you out. So if you can put your focus on bringing more fun, it can be training, positive reinforcement training activities, playing games, doing scenting work, enriching activities, scenting work in your home or your yard. You don't even have to leave the house to do this stuff. This will just change the quality of your time together and get you back on track. Because a lot of times when most of our time is spent in the state where we're worried about stuff when we're with our dogs, it changes the quality of the relationship. And so I really think it's valuable for us to be able to shift things back to a healthier perspective, where you spend more time with your dog and get a chance to remember and experience how awesome they are, that they really are fantastic. And so doing that, along with advocating for them when you're outside and building up their skill set so that eventually you can use that as extra support for them, all those things will come together, not only to benefit your dog, but to help you and your confidence, and to make it less stressful and take more of the drama, the bad drama, out of your lives together. Alrighty, so those are the tips and strategies that I would suggest for you to feel more confident and empowered when you're out. I do have, if you're interested on learning a little more about the other end of the leash and helping your dog specifically, I do have a handout. It's called 8 Ways to Take the Stress Out of Your Walks, that you are welcome to get a copy of. That's on my group page. So you can come over and get a copy of that for yourself. And I'm also very excited that some point soon in July, we're actually going to be starting a 5-day challenge where it's free and you can just sign up. And every day I'm going to give you an activity to help you take the stress out of your walks with your dog, with your fearful or reactive dog. So I think that will be a lot of fun, and I invite you to come in and take part in that too. So thanks again. Thanks so much for joining in and having a listen. If you have any questions or comments, you're more than welcome to leave them in the post. I always try to get right back to people and give them some feedback or support. So the questions I love, please don't be shy about that. I hope you've enjoyed the chat. Hope to see you again soon. Have a great day with your dogs. Take care. Bye, guys.